Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about Muhammad Ali, boxer. You might have heard of him. Um, the topic of this video is going to be to explore Muhammad Ali's alleged condition, Parkinson's disease, and possible alternative theories as to its natural occurrence. Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Marcellus Clay, Jr., January 17th, 1942, fellow Capricorn, was an American professional boxer and activist. Nicknamed the Greatest, he is regarded as one of the most significant sports figures of the 20th century and is frequently ranked as the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time. In 1999, he was named Sportsman of the Century by Sports Illustrated and the Sports Personality of the Century by the BBC. Born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, he began training as an amateur boxer at age 12. At age 18, he won a gold medal in the late heavyweight division of the 1960 Summer Olympics and turned professional later that year. He became a Muslim after 1961. Okay, so around the same time. He won the World Heavyweight Championship, defeating from Sonny Liston in a major upset on February 25th, 1964, at age 22. During that year, he denounced his birth name as a slave name and formally changed his name to Muhammad Ali. In 1966, Ali refused to be drafted into the military owing to his religious beliefs and ethical opposition to the Vietnam War, and was found guilty of draft evasion and stripped of his boxing titles. He stayed out of prison while appealing the decision to the Supreme Court, where his conviction was overturned in 1971. He did not fight for nearly 4 years and lost a period of peak performance as an athlete. Ali's actions as a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War made him an icon for the larger counterculture of the 1960s generation, and he was a very high-profile figure of racial pride for African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement and throughout his career. As a Muslim, Ali was initially affiliated with Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam, NOI. He later disavowed the NOI, adhering to Sunni Islam. He fought in several historic boxing matches, including his highly publicized fights with Sonny Liston, Joe Frazier, including the Fight of the Century, the biggest boxing event up until then, the Thrilla in Manila, and his fight with George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali thrived in the spotlight at a time when many boxers let their managers do the talking, and he became renowned for his provocative and outlandish persona. He was famous for trash talking, often freestyled with rhyme schemes and spoken word poetry, incorporating elements of hip-hop. He often predicted in which round he would knock out his opponent. That line made me a little bit suspicious. Outside boxing, Ali attained success as a spoken word artist, releasing 2 studio albums, I Am the Greatest, 1963, and The Adventures of Ali and His Gang vs. Mr. Tooth Decay, 1976. Both albums received Grammy Award nominations. We gotta check those out. He also featured as an actor and writer, releasing 2 autobiographies. Ali retired from boxing in 1981 and focused on religion, philanthropy, and activism. In 1984, he made public his diagnosis of Parkinson's syndrome, which some reports attributed to boxing-related injuries, though he and his specialist physicians disputed this. He remained an active public figure globally, but in his later years made fewer public appearances as his condition worsened and he was cared for by his family. I say that this line makes me suspicious because before reading this article, I'd completely forgotten that most major sports are completely rigged and controlled by the mafia, among other organizations. So it's quite likely that he was controlled, just because it's almost impossible for a common person to gain celebrity or international fame without being controlled by somebody or handled by somebody. the powers that be, I don't think, let a loose cannon onto the deck that easily. But it's also possible that he was the free agent, because who knows? It was 50 years ago, and he was the great icon for both Muslims and Black Americans and African descendant people throughout the world. And he was an icon of the counterculture movement. So if you're the FBI or a major, organization, this is probably somebody you either want to control or take out if you can't control them. And I would say the Nation of Islam thing is probably the most controversial thing that he was part of. The draft dodging thing, I don't think is thought of as too bad these days. But the Nation of Islam is kind of thought of as a radical militant organization, and even though all Nation of Islam people I've met have been extremely peaceful, nice, friendly people, and so I could see this as being extremely problematic for the powers that be. All right, let's read some more. Declassified NSA files show agency spied on Muhammad Ali and MLK. This article is by Ed Pilkington from 2013. Operation Minaret, set up in the 1960s to monitor anti-Vietnam critics, branded disreputable if not outright illegal by NSA itself. So do they are they going to prosecute themselves, or what's happening with that? The National Security Agency secretly tapped into the overseas phone calls of prominent critics of the Vietnam War, including Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, and 2 actively serving U.S. senators, newly declassified material has revealed. The NSA has been forced to disclose previously secret passages in its own official 4-volume history of its Cold War snooping activities. The newly released material reveals the breathtaking and probably illegal lengths that the agency went to in the late 1960s and 70s in an attempt to try to hold back the rising tide of anti-Vietnam War sentiment. That included tapping into phone calls and cable communications of 2 serving senators, the Idaho Democrat Frank Church and Howard Baker. The Idaho Democrat Frank Church and Howard Baker, a Republican from Tennessee, who puzzlingly was a firm supporter of the war effort in Vietnam. The NSA also intercepted the foreign communications of prominent journalists such as Tom Wicker of the New York Times and the popular satirical writer for the Washington Post, Art Buchwald. Alongside King, a second leading civil rights figure, Whitney Young of the National Urban League, was also surreptitiously monitored. The heavyweight boxing champion, Muhammad Ali, was put on the watch list in about 1967 after he spoke out about Vietnam. He was jailed having refused to be drafted into the army, was stripped of his title, and banned from fighting, and is thought to have remained a target of surveillance for the next 6 years. So from 1967 to 1973, the agency, 1973, mark that down. The agency went to great lengths to keep its activities, known as Operation Minaret, from public view. All reports generated for Minaret were printed on plain paper, unadorned with the NSA logo or other identifying marks other than the stamp for background use only. They were delivered by hand directly to the White House, often going specifically to successive presidents. Lyndon Johnson, who set the program to successive presidents. Lyndon Johnson, who set the program up in 1967, and Richard Nixon. Okay. Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon. The lack of judicial oversight of the snooping program led even the NSA's own history to conclude that Minaret was disreputable, if not outright illegal. The new disclosures were prized from the current NSA following an appeal to the Security Classification Appeals Panel by the National Security Archive, an independent research institute based at the George Washington University. Clearly, the NSA didn't want to release this material, but they were forced to do so by the American equivalent of the Supreme Court of Freedom of Information law, said Matthew Aid, an intelligence historian specializing in the NSA. Together with William Burr of the National Security Archive, Aid has co-authored an article in Foreign Policy that explores the significance of the new disclosures. In addition to the 7 names of spying targets listed in the NSA history, the 2 authors confirm the names of other targets on the watch list from declassified documents at the Gerald Ford Presidential Library in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Jane Fonda, Kathy Boudoir, Black Power activist Stokely Carmichael. It's a tight name, Stokely. In total, some 1,650 individuals were tracked by the NSA between 1967 and 1973, though the identities of most of those people remain unknown. Okay. The rest of the article does not look very interesting. Okay. And that was from The Guardian. Okay, here's another article from Reuters, or Reuters, by Alex Dobuzinskis. FBI kept tags on Muhammad Ali in 1966 during Nation of Islam probe. The FBI kept a close watch on so this is the FBI, not the NSA. The FBI kept a close watch on activities of Muhammad Ali in 1966, so a year earlier than the NSA, with a particular focus on his links to the Nation of Islam, a black movement that the agency viewed as subversive according to archival documents posted on the FBI website. The Federal Bureau of Investigation released the documents in response to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit by the conservative group Judicial Watch. Ali, one of the world's most famous celebrities and revered role model for African Americans, died in June at age 74. His death triggered an outpouring of affection for the former heavyweight champion, known as much for his social activism and humanitarianism as for his legendary boxing career. The FBI's disclosures reveal another example of the agency's surveillance activities during the 1960s and 1970s under the direction of J. Edgar Hoover. Okay. Among the public figures the FBI monitored in those turbulent years were civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. and singer-songwriter John Lennon. Okay. Poor, dang. Does everybody they monitor die? The latest batch of about 140 pages of FBI documents included previously classified material on Ali from 1966. In the FBI's view, Ali may have posed a threat because he was a potential source of money and charismatic leadership for the civil rights movement, which Hoover, as FBI director, opposed, said Michael Ezra, a professor at Sonoma State University and author of a book on Ali. Ali was an important symbol to the rights movement, a galvanizing force, and him running around free was a problem for the FBI, Ezra said in a telephone interview on Friday. Representatives of the FBI could not be reached for comment. James Comey, FBI director, oh my god, James Comey. What a guy. FBI director since 2013. Has said he regrets the... Sorry. Oh man, James Comey. Has said he regrets the Bureau's abuses under Hoover. The papers, which use Ali's birth name Cassius Clay, included a request for agents to monitor his divorce that year from his first wife as a lead. The Miami FBI office is requested to follow the divorce action between Cassius and Sanja Clay, with particular emphasis being placed on any NOI, Nation of Islam, implication being brought into this matter, one memo stated. A separate FBI memo on a speech Ali gave in 1966 at a mosque said he discussed efforts to strip him of his heavyweight title and blamed the white man. Well, you know, the white man in charge, you know, like, anyway, sorry, am I being defensive? The controversy centered on Ali's refusal to be drafted into the U.S. military during the Vietnam War, and his claim of conscientious objector status, which would lead to his being stripped of the boxing title in 1967. After a successful legal battle, Ali regained the title in a 1974 bout. Bam. That's how you do it. In the documents, FBI officials stressed Ali was not personally under investigation. One memo said Ali's connection to the African American political and religious group, the Nation of Islam, which was under FBI investigation at the time, made the Bureau interested in his activities from an intelligence standpoint. Okay, that's okay. Some of the documents mention Mainbout Inc., a boxing promotion company that Ali established with the leaders of the Nation of Islam. The company was a source of money for them until Ali's 1967 conviction for draft evasion. Okay, so the draft evasion conviction, okay, took that company down. A spokesman for the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, Kentucky, said no one there had a comment on the FBI file. Okay. The information in the file is not necessarily derogatory to Ali, said Chris Farrell, research director at Judicial Watch, which routinely asks the FBI to release its files of famous people who have died. Historically, it's interesting because it gives a snapshot of what the FBI was doing, what it was spending its time and energy on at the time with its very notable public figure. With this very notable public figure, Farrell said. Judicial Watch has received even more FBI documents about Ali than the 140 pages posted on the Bureau's website and will release them after a review, Farrell said. Okay. Something about Ali and Parkinson's. In the late 1970s, the public observed changes in Ali's speed and speech. However, he wasn't actually diagnosed with Parkinson's until 1984. So late 1970s, so 1965, 66, etc. plus. Sorry, 1975 plus. The news came just 3 years after he formally retired from boxing. And this is from Parkinson Review, ParkinsonNewsToday.com. This is from Radar Online. I don't know how legitimate this is. Not that the other sources were more legitimate, but take it with a grain of salt, as with everything. This is by Rosa Sanchez, March 13th, 2018. Muhammad Ali is known today as one of the most significant and celebrated sports figures of the 20th century, and no doubt the best. No doubt the best boxer of all time. After his shocking 2016 death, investigators began looking into his medical past, trying to understand if his fighting career had anything to do with his declining health. Reel's new docuseries, Autopsy Muhammad Ali, gives fans an insight into the later boxer's pill habits and the medicine overdose that may have killed him. If Muhammad Ali did have thyroid problems, then this could well be implicated in his death, and it would definitely have impacted on his abilities as a boxer, says Autopsy's Dr. Michael Hunter in the show teaser. As RadarOnline.com has learned, Ali's longtime doctor prescribed him the drug Thyrolar for his alleged thyroid condition. Thyrolar, also known as Liotrix, is a treatment for an underactive thyroid, explains Dr. Hunter. Thyrolar supplements the output of the thyroid gland. It can have numerous side effects, which include vomiting and muscle pain. It's hard to get the dosage right. An excessive amount can cause an accelerated heart rate. While he was on the medication, Ali told friends that he often took 2 or 3 times the recommended dose. Well, you know, he's a big guy. That might not necessarily be illogical. He said, if one was good, 2 would be better, admits Ali's former friend, Tim Shanahan, in the clip. According to Dr. Hunter, notes from Muhammad Ali's records show that his thyroid problem may have been misdiagnosed. In preparation for his fight, Ali was also reportedly taking Diterix, which is a drug very similar to amphetamine. This is a major red flag, concludes Hunter. And finally, I wanted to talk about drug-induced Parkinsonism. This is from National Library of Medicine, Journal of Clinical Neurology article, published by Hae-Won Shin of the Department of Neurology, Chung University College of Medicine, Seoul, Korea, and Sunju Chung, Parkinson Alzheimer's Center, Department of Neurology, University of Ulsan College of Medicine, Seoul, Korea. Abstract. Drug-Induced Parkinsonism, DIP, is the second most common etiology of Parkinsonism in the elderly after Parkinson's disease, PD. Many patients with DIP may be misdiagnosed with PD because the clinical features of these two conditions are indistinguishable. Moreover, neurological deficits in patients with DIP may be severe enough to affect daily activities and may persist for long periods of time after the cessation of drug taking. In addition to typical antipsychotics, DIP may be caused by gastrointestinal prokinetics, calcium channel blockers, atypical antipsychotics, and anti-epileptic drugs. The clinical manifestations of DIP are classically described as bilateral and symmetric Parkinsonism without tremor arrest. However, about half of DIP patients show asymmetrical Parkinsonism and tremor arrest, making it difficult to differentiate DIP from PD. The pathophysiology of DIP is related to drug-induced changes in the basal ganglia motor circuit secondary to dopaminergic receptor blockade. Since these effects are limited to postsynaptic dopaminergic receptors, it is expected that presynaptic dopaminergic neurons in the striatum will be intact. Dopamine transporter DAT imaging is useful for diagnosing presynaptic Parkinsonism. DAT uptake in the striatum is significantly decreased even in the early stage of PD, and this characteristic may help in differentiating PD from DIP. DIP may have a significant and long-standing effect on patients' daily lives, and so physicians should be cautious when prescribing dopaminergic receptor blockers and should monitor patients' neurological signs, especially for Parkinsonism and other movement disorders. And Parkinson's disease patients with DIP are frequently misdiagnosed as having PD. These patients are often prescribed anti-Parkinsonian drugs unnecessarily for long periods of time, despite recovery being possible simply by discontinuing the offending drugs. Dopamine transporter DAT imaging may be useful in the differential diagnosis of various etiologies of Parkinsonism, including DIP. And the aim of this review was to provide clinicians with updated information about the clinical characteristics and DAT imaging findings of patients with DIP and about the correct treatment for DIP. The treatment is cessation of treatment, sounds like, or of drug treatment. And I don't know if you can put these pieces together, but it sounds like his Parkinsonism was a result of his drug use, of his long-term prescribed drug use potentially, and he was misdiagnosed and he died an untimely early death, potentially, which is kind of sad, considering he's a great character, and potentially a great person too, if he was legitimately a free agent. And yeah, sorry, this is irrelevant, but good music. That's all for now. If I have any more thoughts, I will post about it and add it to a playlist. But, you know, be careful with drugs, you know? They're serious things.